Rome was the most powerful civilization on earth. Its legions had never been defeated. Its generals had never known fear. And then, one man changed everything. He crossed a mountain range that was supposed to be impossible to cross. He brought war elephants through frozen peaks where thousands of his own men died, and when he finally reached the other side, he didn't just defeat Rome, he humiliated it. For 16 years he lived inside Roman territory, winning battle after battle, killing hundreds of thousands of Roman soldiers, and Rome, the greatest military power the world had ever seen, couldn't stop him. His name was Hannibal Barca. And this is the story of the man who almost erased Rome from history. Hannibal was born in 247 BC in Carthage, a city in modern-day Tunisia. At the time, Carthage was Rome's only real rival, a trading empire that controlled the Western Mediterranean, rich, powerful, and proud. But when Hannibal was just a boy, Carthage lost a war, the First Punic War. Rome took Sicily, demanded massive payments, humiliated Carthage on the world stage. Hannibal's father was Hannibal Barca, one of Carthage's greatest generals, a man who had fought Rome and lost, not because he wasn't good enough, but because his own government abandoned him. Hamilcar never forgot, and he made sure his son wouldn't either. When Hannibal was 9 years old, his father took him to a temple. He made the boy place his hand on the altar and swear an oath. The ancient historian Polybius recorded Hannibal's own words about that day. "My father made me swear that I would never be a friend of Rome." This wasn't just hatred, this was programming. From that moment on, Hannibal had one purpose in life: destroy Rome. Everything else, family, wealth, comfort, was secondary. He spent his childhood in military camps in Spain, where his father was building a new power base, learning strategy, learning languages, learning how to command men. By the time he was 26, both his father and brother-in-law had died, and Hannibal took command of the Carthaginian forces in Spain. The soldiers didn't question it. They had watched him grow up among them. They had seen him fight alongside them. He wasn't just their general, he was their brother, and now he was ready to fulfill his oath. In 218 BC, Hannibal made his move, but he didn't do what Rome expected. The Romans assumed that any attack would come by sea. They controlled the Mediterranean. They had the superior navy. Hannibal knew this, so he chose a different path. He would go by land, through Spain, through Gaul, and then over the Alps, the most brutal mountain range in Europe, frozen peaks, narrow paths, avalanches, cliffs that dropped thousands of feet into nothing. No army had ever crossed the Alps. It was considered impossible. Hannibal didn't care. He assembled a force of around 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and, most famously, 37 war elephants. And in late autumn, the worst possible time, he began the crossing. Dramatic music intensifies. The journey took about 2 weeks, and it was a nightmare. Snow blinded the men, paths crumbled under their feet. Hostile mountain tribes attacked them constantly. Thousands of soldiers fell to their deaths. The elephants, massive, terrified, slipping on ice, became a liability. Most of them died on the mountains. Livy, the Roman historian, described the scene. The soldiers despaired. They saw nothing but rocks and ice. Men fell from the cliffs. Animals screamed as they slid into the abyss. It seemed the gods themselves had forbidden this passage. When Hannibal finally descended into Italy, he had lost nearly half his army, but he had done the impossible. He was now inside Roman territory, with a hardened force of survivors who had proven they would follow him anywhere. And Rome had no idea he was coming. The Romans were stunned. An enemy army inside Italy. It was unthinkable. They scrambled to respond, sent a consul named Sempronius with a full legion to intercept Hannibal at the Trebia River. Sempronius was arrogant. He thought Carthaginians were inferior. He attacked immediately. Hannibal destroyed him. He had hidden cavalry in the woods. When the Romans advanced, they were surrounded, slaughtered. Thousands died in the freezing water trying to escape. Rome sent another army, led by another consul, Flaminius. Hannibal ambushed him at Lake Trasimene. This time, he he hid his entire army in the morning fog along the hills surrounding the lake. When Flaminius marched his legions along the shore, Hannibal struck from everywhere at once. The Romans couldn't form battle lines, couldn't see their enemy, couldn't even see each other. 15,000 Roman soldiers died in 3 hours. Flaminius himself was killed. It was the largest ambush in military history. Rome was in panic. 2 armies destroyed, 2 consuls dead, and Hannibal was still coming. They turned to a man named Fabius Maximus, a cautious general who refused to fight directly. Fabius followed Hannibal, harassed him, cut off his supplies, but never engaged. The Romans hated this strategy. They called Fabius a coward. They wanted revenge. So they did something unprecedented. They raised the largest army Rome had ever assembled, 80,000 men, 8 full legions, and they marched to meet Hannibal at a place called Cannae. August 2nd, 216 BC, the Roman army stood on the plains of Cannae, 80,000 men, the largest force they had ever put in the field. Against them, Hannibal, with roughly 50,000. The Romans were confident. They had the numbers, they had the heavy infantry. They would simply crush the Carthaginians with overwhelming force. Hannibal knew exactly what they would do, and he had a plan. He arranged his army in a curve, bulging toward the Romans in the center. The center was made of his weakest troops, Gauls and Spaniards. On the flanks, hidden from view, he placed his elite African infantry and his cavalry. The battle began. The Romans charged forward. Their massive center pushed into Hannibal's line, and the center gave way. The Gauls and Spaniards fell back, step by step, slowly. The Romans thought they were winning. They pushed harder, deeper into the Carthaginian formation, but they didn't notice what was happening on the sides. Hannibal's cavalry destroyed the Roman cavalry, then swung around to the rear, and then the trap closed. The African infantry on both flanks turned inward. The cavalry hit from behind. 80,000 Romans were now surrounded. What followed was not a battle, it was a massacre. The Romans were packed so tight they couldn't lift their swords. They were cut down in rows. By the end of the day, between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers lay dead, including 1 consul, 2 quaestors, 29 military tribunes, and 80 senators. 1/5 of Rome's entire male population of fighting age killed in a single afternoon. Cannae remains the deadliest single-day battle in Western military history, and military academies around the world still teach Hannibal's double envelopment as the perfect tactical victory. Generals from Napoleon to Schwarzkopf have studied it, tried to replicate it. Most failed. Because Cannae wasn't just about tactics. It was about a man who understood his enemy completely and used that understanding to destroy them. After Cannae, Hannibal's cavalry commander, Hannibal, came to him with a proposal. "Give me the cavalry. In 5 days we will be dining on the Capitol in Rome." Hannibal refused. The reasons are still debated by historians. Maybe he lacked siege equipment. Maybe he feared a trap. Maybe he believed Rome would surrender. Hannibal's response was recorded for history. "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you don't know how to use one." Rome never surrendered, despite Cannae, despite losing army after army, despite having an enemy camped on their soil for 16 years. They simply refused to give up. They raised new legions, from boys, from slaves, from anyone who could hold a sword. They avoided direct battle, wore Hannibal down, cut off his reinforcements. Carthage, torn by internal politics, sent almost no support. And slowly, year after year, Hannibal's position weakened. In 203 BC, Rome invaded North Africa directly. Threatening Carthage itself, Hannibal was recalled home. The man who had spent 16 years trying to destroy Rome had to leave without finishing the job. Hannibal faced the Romans one last time at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. This time he lost. The Roman general Scipio, who had studied Hannibal's tactics, used them against him. Carthage surrendered, paid massive reparations, lost its empire forever. Hannibal survived. He went into politics, tried to rebuild Carthage's economy, but Rome never forgot, never forgave. They demanded his surrender, hunted him across the Mediterranean. In 183 BC, cornered in Bithynia, modern-day Turkey, Hannibal took poison rather than be captured. His final words, according to Livy, "Let us free Rome from her long anxiety, since she thinks it too long to wait for an old man's death." He was 64 years old. He had spent his entire life fighting Rome, and in the end, Rome won. But the fear he inspired never went away. For generations after his death, whenever Roman children misbehaved, their parents would say, "Hannibal ad portas." Hannibal is at the gates. The man became a ghost, a warning, a legend. And even today, 2200 years later, we're still telling his story. Hannibal Barca never achieved his dream of destroying Rome, but he came closer than anyone in history. He proved that Rome wasn't invincible, that one man, with enough determination, could bring an empire to its knees. And he left behind a blueprint for military genius that generals have tried to copy for 2000 years. The oath he swore as a 9-year-old boy, he kept it until his dying breath. Not many men can say that. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel. We're going to explore more conquerors, more battles, more forgotten heroes who shaped the world. And leave a comment. Do you think Hannibal should have marched on Rome after Cannae? Would history be different? I'll see you in the next one.